In the second virtual lab experiment, you will be preparing two buffers and testing their buffering capacity. A buffer is a mixture of a conjugate acid-base pair. In this experiment, you will be preparing an acetate buffer and an ammonia buffer. For the acetate buffer, you will need acetic acid, which is a weak acid, 1 molar solution, as well as its conjugate base of sodium acetate. You will also be needing distilled water and a 100 milliliter volumetric flask. You'll first be adding 8.20 milliliters of acetic acid and 1.8 milliliters of sodium acetate. As with a normal lab, it is very difficult to add a precise amount of water from such a large container. A better solution would be to use a beaker and add some volume of water to the beaker and add a smaller amount than you actually need. This brings the meniscus to below the 100 milliliter mark on the volumetric flask. To bring the meniscus and the volume up to that 100 milliliter mark, you can use a pipette and withdraw solution or withdraw water from the beaker and then dispense or pour it very slowly to the volumetric flask. Now that the meniscus is at the 100 milliliter mark, you have your buffer created. The next step would be to prepare this buffer for testing with both hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide, as well as preparing a second buffer of ammonia and ammonium chloride. Once your buffer is prepared, you will be testing it against hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide to see the buffering capacity. The buffering capacity of a buffer is its ability to resist pH change. A better buffer will have a smaller change in pH when either an acid or base is added. For this part of the experiment, you will need a couple of different small beakers, as well as the strong acid of 1 molar hydrochloric acid and the strong base of 1 molar sodium hydroxide. When you select any of these solutions, the pH is indicated on the left-hand side. This is used to figure out the concentration of acid or H+ ions in the solution. You'll add 50 milliliters of your buffer solution to each beaker and then add 1 milliliter of acid to one beaker and 1 milliliter of base to the other. You can see that the pH in both of these has changed from the initial 4.1. From this, you can figure out how well the acetate buffer resisted the change in an acidic environment or a basic environment. you will be preparing both an acetate buffer and an ammonia buffer and comparing the buffering capacities between the two.